My husband's family invited me to the annual Christmas banquet to brag about his cousin's perfect marriage. When I complimented the decor, my mother-in-law sneered, "You wouldn't know taste if it slapped you." I smiled and said, "Funny, I designed this venue's interiors last month." Everyone looked at the walls differently. 2 months later, she booked me for her own party. I'm Kala. 39. Interior designer. Born and raised just outside of Detroit, now living in Chicago for the last 12 years. I run a small but reputable firm, nothing flashy, but the kind of business where your work gets you noticed. I built it from nothing, and it's grown thanks to a lot of grit, a lot of coffee, and just a little bit of therapy. I met my husband, Hugo, at the University of Michigan during a master's program. He's a clinical psychologist, and from day one, he had this very measured, calm energy, charming, low-key, the kind of guy who smiles more with his eyes than his mouth. That calmness used to feel like an anchor. These days? Sometimes it feels like a wall. Hugo comes from money. Not Jeff Bezos money, but the North Shore kind, old homes, family names etched into country club plaques, and brunches where everyone is grateful but concerned about something. His family's from Wilmette, just north of the city. His mom, Doreen, is what I call a silk-gloved saboteur. She never raises her voice, but she can strip you bare with a single-side comment while sipping Chardonnay. From the start, I was never the kind of woman Doreen imagined for her only son. Too practical. Too self-made. She preferred the type who could debate hydrangeas over Prosecco, not someone with paint on their jeans and project blueprints in their bag. Our early years of marriage were manageable. Hugo and I had our apartment, our routines, and just enough distance from his family that we could breathe. But every year, without fail, we'd get summoned to the Harrow family Christmas banquet. And let me tell you, this banquet? It wasn't about holiday cheer. It was a show. The Harrows rotated venues like fashion trends. One year it was a lakeside mansion, the next, a historic ballroom. Always upscale, always full of people in expensive outfits and carefully curated drama. But what truly made these events unbearable wasn't the setting. It was Lizette. Lizette is Hugo's cousin. Blonde, polished, always a little too perfect. Her husband, Barrett, works in finance, or maybe he is finance, I don't know. He talks about hedge funds the way some people talk about pets. At every Christmas banquet, Lizette and Barrett were the headliners. Someone would toast their marriage, comment on their most recent home renovation or charitable donation, and Doreen would swoon like she was their press agent. Meanwhile, I'd sit there in a dress I paid for myself, biting my tongue as people whispered just loud enough for me to hear things like, "Oh, Kala designs things, doesn't she?" like I was finger painting in a garage. But last Christmas? Last Christmas was different. The banquet was held at a brand new venue downtown, called the Arlo. It had been making waves in the design world for its restoration of a historic warehouse into a luxury event space. What most of the Harrows didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone except Hugo, was that my firm had done all of the interiors. From floor plan layout to fixture selection, from antique brass wall sconces to that custom terrazzo bar top, it was mine. My vision. My work. And it was, if I may say so, stunning. I didn't want to say anything before the event. I knew how it would go if I did. Doreen would either dismiss it or act like I was just bragging. So I said nothing. We showed up that evening in a light snow, the streetlights casting this buttery glow on the sidewalks. I wore a black velvet dress with a high neckline and my hair in a low bun. Simple. Sharp. Confident. We stepped inside and immediately, I heard Celeste, Lizette's mom, gushing to a group of her friends about how utterly charming the place was. She was pointing at the wall textures, talking about how the lighting was so tasteful. I almost laughed. Hugo leaned in and murmured, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I just smiled. About 20 minutes in, I was standing near the main seating area, chatting with a couple I vaguely knew, when Doreen walked up. She gave me that little tight-lipped smirk she always reserves for me. This place is better than last year, I offered, just making casual conversation. She blinked, then tilted her head. You wouldn't know taste if it slapped you, she said flatly. Like she was complimenting my shoes. Now normally, I would have brushed that off. Maybe laughed awkwardly and excused myself. But not this time. I turned to her, still smiling. That's funny, I said. I designed this venue's interiors last month. Her smirk faltered. What? I was the lead designer for this space. My firm handled the entire renovation. From the bar over there, I gestured, to the color palette, custom seating, everything. The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. I didn't need to look around to know people had heard. I saw Lizette pause mid-step. Barrett turned slightly, eyes darting around like he was scanning a spreadsheet for an error. Doreen opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again. Oh, she said finally. Just that one word. Nothing else. I could see her trying to process it, trying to decide if she'd rather pretend it wasn't true or pivot into some false praise. She chose silence. That, in itself, felt like a victory. And here's the part that got me. As the night went on, people started commenting. An older man asked who had picked the lighting, said it was warm but not too dim. A woman in a red gown asked if I knew who had chosen the wall art. Hugo just chuckled every time someone asked. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The room did it for me. That night, I didn't just feel seen. I felt known. And then, 2 months later, I got an email. From Doreen. It was through my firm's website, submitted like a regular client inquiry. She wanted help redecorating her living and dining room for her 65th birthday party. The message was formal. No mention of the banquet. No reference to her comment. Just a name, a budget, and a list of inspiration photos. I stared at that email for a good 10 minutes. Hugo walked in, saw my expression, and asked what was up. Your mom wants to hire me, I said. He blinked. For real? I nodded. Guess she decided taste did slap her. He laughed until he had to sit down. I waited a full day before I responded. Then I replied with a polite, professional, happy to discuss the project. And that's when things got really interesting. So, after I replied to Doreen's email, we set up a consultation. I arrived at her house in Highland Park that next Thursday. It was a frigid morning, the kind where your breath fogs instantly and every step in the snow squeaks beneath your boots. She answered the door in a cashmere cardigan and that same blank smile she always wore, like she wasn't quite sure if I was welcome or not. Calla, she said with a slight nod. Come in. The house was dated. Stiff floral drapes, matching damask wallpaper and upholstery, furniture that had probably cost a fortune in 1989 and hadn't moved since. It smelled faintly of rose potpourri and lemon polish. The kind of space that screamed, don't sit too comfortably. She led me into the formal living room, where we sat across from each other, a heavy mahogany coffee table between us. Her posture was straight, hands folded like she was preparing for a deposition. So, she started, as I mentioned in my inquiry, I'd like to refresh this space. For my birthday in June. I nodded. Great. What kind of look are you going for? There was a pause. A weird one. She opened a folder and pulled out a few magazine clippings. Not Pinterest boards, not house printouts, literal clippings, like we were on a DIY home improvement show from 2005. Muted neutrals. Warm grays. Lots of layered lighting. She had circled things in pen. I took them without commenting. Let her speak. I just want something tasteful. Modern, but not trendy. Sophisticated. She looked directly at me. You know. Good taste. I didn't flinch. I can work with that. That was the first of many meetings. She hired me officially a week later. No mention of the Christmas party. No mention of her comment. no apology. But also, no micromanaging. That was the first surprise. The second surprise? She listened. I'd recommend switching out her traditional sconces for minimalist brass ones. She'd nod. I'd suggest reupholstering the armchairs in a soft mohair. She'd say, whatever you think is best. The woman who once flinched at the idea of matte black hardware now wanted to see more samples. It was eerie. At one point, I asked Hugo, "Do you think your mom's possessed?" He grinned. Maybe she's just finally realizing what everyone else already knew. As the project took shape, the house began to shift in energy. The rooms opened up. The lighting changed. Doreen even started asking me questions, not just about the design, but about my life. Like she was trying to fill in the blanks she'd always ignored. She asked how my business was doing. How I found clients. She even asked if I'd ever thought about publishing a book. I blinked at her, not entirely sure if it was a setup. Still, I played it cool. Always professional. Always a step removed. Because here's the thing, even when someone acts nice, when someone suddenly treats you with a respect they previously withheld, there's always a part of you waiting for the catch. Waiting for the backhanded compliment. Waiting for the temperature to drop. And the moment I let my guard down, it did. It was a sunny morning, late April. We were finalizing fabric swatches for her dining room curtains. I was flipping through options, and Doreen said, "You know, Calla, I have to admit. I was surprised when I found out you'd designed the Arlo." I looked up. "Oh?" She smiled, tight and small. "Well, it just didn't seem like something you would have done." I tilted my head slightly. "What do you mean?" "Oh, not in a bad way," she said quickly, waving her hand. "I just always thought your work was a bit more eclectic. Younger." Younger. I knew exactly what she meant. She meant, I didn't think you had the sophistication to pull off something like that. And there it was. I took a breath. Smiled politely. Design evolves, Doreen. So do designers. She nodded. Yes, well. I suppose you're growing into your taste. Growing into it. That night, I told Hugo about it over dinner. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. She can't help herself, he said. Even when she's impressed, she still needs to feel like she's above it. I shrugged. I don't need her to bow down. But I'm not going to pretend she hasn't spent 10 years quietly cutting me down either. He sighed. Do you want me to say something? No, I said. Let me finish the job. Then I'll decide what kind of statement I want to make. Because at that point, I wasn't just designing a room anymore. I was building a statement, a perfectly curated, high-impact space that she would show off to all her friends without knowing it would be my name in every corner. My aesthetic. My fingerprints. My taste. She wouldn't be able to escape it. And neither would the rest of the Harrows. See, her birthday party? Was shaping up to be another Harrow-level event. Caterers. A private string quartet. Even Lizette was flying in from Charleston. The guest list? Over 100. And guess who she introduced as her designer in the group email? Calla, my daughter-in-law, who you may remember designed the interiors at the Arlo. Just like that. Like none of the last decade had ever happened. But don't worry, I remembered. And I had something planned. Want me to keep going? It gets so much better. The weeks leading up to Doreen's party were a blur of final installations and vendor coordination. Custom dining chairs from a boutique upholsterer in Milwaukee. A chandelier I had commissioned from a glass artisan in Seattle. Every single element, down to the linen texture of the window treatments, was deliberate. Elegant, but not obvious. Designed to feel expensive without shouting it. That was my power move. Not loud. Just undeniable. And in between all of it, Doreen was, oddly gracious. Cooperative. Almost supportive. We didn't talk about personal things, no sudden warmth or apologies, but she had stopped with the microaggressions. She even said, once, in passing, "I'm glad at you doing this. You seem to really understand the bones of the house." I nodded, but didn't respond. What I wanted to say was, "I've always understood it. You just finally stopped pretending I didn't." Then, 3 days before the party, I got the call. Celeste. Lizette's mother. Doreen's older sister and, arguably, the loudest voice in the family's social circle. She was calling to inquire if I was available to do some light staging for her daughter's upcoming vow renewal in September. I blinked at the voicemail. Hugo watched me from the couch, a forkful of leftover Thai food paused in midair. "She's joking, right?" "I don't think she knows how," I said. I didn't call her back. Not right away. I let it sit. I wanted to see how the party played out first. Because Doreen's birthday party? It wasn't just a party. It was a presentation. Her unofficial re-entry into the North Shore social calendar after almost 2 years of low-key events and scaled-back gatherings. It was going to be full of the people who used to side-eye me at brunches. The same ones who whispered about Hugo marrying an outsider. And now? They'd be sipping champagne in a room I built from the studs out. The day of the party was a humid Saturday in early June. The florists arrived first, setting up peonies and ranunculus in cup crystal vases I had recommended. The lighting guys came next, placing soft glow uplighting along the gallery wall. Then the caterers rolled in with an actual ice sculpture, because of course they did. I arrived in the late afternoon to oversee the final walkthrough. Doreen, to her credit, was dressed and ready, flitting around in a champagne silk wrap dress and surprisingly tasteful slingbacks. She glanced at me as I walked in and gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. "You've really outdone yourself," she said. "It's perfect." There was a long pause after that. I didn't feel it. She added, "I don't say that lightly." I nodded once, professional as ever. "Thank you." And then I left. I wasn't staying for the party. I wasn't invited as a guest, only as the designer. And I was fine with that. Actually, I preferred it. Because being in that room, basking in the compliments while people slowly realized I was that Calla? That would have been satisfying, sure. But letting her be the one to take all the questions? Letting her say my name? That was better. But, as I was leaving, something unexpected happened. Lizette arrived early. She stepped out of a black SUV in a body-hugging emerald gown and her usual cloud of expensive perfume. Her hair was curled into those shiny, effortless waves that you know took 2 hours and a team of stylists. She spotted me walking toward my car and waved. "Calla," she called out. "Wow, the space looks incredible." I stopped. A little stunned. "Thanks," I said. "Glad you like it." She looked around, nodding. "It's a huge improvement from the last time I was here. The dining room used to feel like a doctor's office. Now it's editorial." I blinked. "That's quite the compliment." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "So listen. Mom said you might be doing our vow renewal in September?" I held my tote bag a little tighter. "She left me a message," I said evenly. Lizette smiled. "You should do it. We want something modern but classic. You'd be perfect." I stared at her, trying to find any trace of sarcasm. But there was none. Just genuine interest. Maybe a little nervousness. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." She beamed, like we'd just sealed a pact. And then she walked into the house I had reimagined, heels clicking against the white oak floors I had selected, beneath the cove lighting I had angled precisely to make her gown shimmer. And I got in my car, drove home, and poured a glass of wine. Later that evening, Hugo came home from the party. I hadn't asked him to go. I figured he'd want to avoid it, but he said he wanted to see how it all turned out. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the front door, toed off his shoes, and collapsed onto the couch with a grin. "So?" I asked. "Oh," he said, "it was glorious." He described how people kept asking who did the house. How Doreen's friends kept asking for my card. How someone cornered her by the sideboard to ask if she could recommend a tasteful designer for their lake house. "And what did she say?" I asked. Hugo smirked. "She said, my daughter-in-law. She's brilliant." I raised my eyebrows. "Did she say it like she meant it?" He tilted his head. "She said it like she needed people to know." "And that?" "That was enough." But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because what came next, the vow renewal, the family drama that unfolded, and the one moment that finally tipped the whole house of cards, made the Christmas banquet look like a dress rehearsal. Want me to keep going? Trust me, it explodes from here. A week after Doreen's party, I finally returned Celeste's call. I wasn't going to at first. Part of me felt like it was a trap, like maybe this was a way to fold me into some twisted family power play. But curiosity won out. Plus, I needed to know what they really wanted. Celeste answered on the second ring, breathless, like she'd been waiting next to the phone. "Calla. Darling, I'm so thrilled you called back. I've been just dying to get your eye on the vow renewal. We're thinking something elegant, but with a coastal flair. You know, understated luxury." Understated. From a woman who once tried to install a champagne tower in her foyer for a baptism reception. Still, I played it cool. "Happy to talk more. What's your budget?" The silence on the line was brief, but telling. North Shore families never lead with a number. They want to be courted. They want you to assume money is no object, until it is. "Well," she said, "Lizette and Barrett are still finalizing numbers. But we'd love to get a proposal from you. Something flexible." Flexible. Right. I agreed to meet with them at the venue they'd already booked, a lakeside country club in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, complete with a manicured lawn and a ballroom lined with ivory paneling and gold leaf cornices. I drove up on a Tuesday afternoon, walked through the space, and listened to Lizette talk about quiet opulence while Barrett scrolled through golf scores on his phone. When they finished their pitch, Lizette looked at me and said, "I mean, you did the Arlo. You clearly know how to elevate a space without making it feel like it's trying too hard. That's the vibe we want." I took a beat. Then smiled. Understood. I went home that night and built them 2 proposals. The first was exactly what they said they wanted: clean lines, soft linens, pale coastal colors, glass accents, a few dramatic floral installations. The second was exaggerated. Over the top. All white everything. Faux luxury. Mirror runners, overdone florals, LED lit vases. It looked like a wedding expo exploded. I labeled them Option A and Option B. I sent the file to Celeste, Lizette, and Barrett. 2 days later, I got their reply. They picked Option B. Of course they did. Because deep down, for all their talk about taste and elegance, the truth was, Lizette didn't want quiet sophistication. She wanted photos. She wanted sparkle. She wanted people to gasp when they walked in. So I gave it to her. To the letter. I executed it with full commitment. Not a single detail was out of place. It was exactly what they signed off on. White acrylic chairs. Centerpieces taller than your average toddler. A literal flower wall spelling out "Forever Begins Again." It looked expensive. It also looked like an influencer wedding sponsored by a discount candle brand. But Lizette? Loved it. The guests? Not so much. I wasn't there for the actual ceremony. I made sure to skip it, but Hugo's cousin Theo sent me a video from the reception. You can hear someone in the background whisper, "Did she get married or launch a skincare line?" Another one, "It's like a Kardashian's ghost is haunting the dining room." And then, near the end of the night, Celeste apparently made a comment to a local columnist friend of hers, something about how the designer took creative liberties and overdid it. Guess who had the email receipts? The proposal PDF? The approval chain? Me. I didn't blast them. I didn't post anything. I didn't even reply. But when Celeste forwarded me a request for some minor post-event clarifications, I responded with a screenshot of Lizette's email that read, "Love this. Let's go all in on option B. Sparkle is good. Sparkle sparkles sparkles," and then I attached the signed contract. No drama. Just proof. Later that week, I got a text from Doreen. It was short. Saw the vow renewal photos. Yours was better. That was it. No emojis. No exclamation. Just that dry, reluctant concession I'd waited a decade to hear. And that was all I needed. Because here's the thing about revenge, it doesn't always come from shouting or confrontations. Sometimes, it's just being so good they have to choke on their own words. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is simply being right. They used to say I didn't have taste. That I was too young, too bold, trying too hard. Now? I'm the one they all call when they need something to impress their friends. I didn't change who I was. They just finally had to see it. And now, every time someone walks into one of my spaces and asks, "Who designed this?" Doreen, Celeste, even Lizette, they all say the same name. Mine. And that's all the payback I'll ever need.